Welcome. On the 28th of May 2022, 19-year-old farmer known as Dylan Rounds was unfortunately murdered by the hands of James Brenner on site at the Grainshed property in Lucin, Utah. The time of death estimated between 7:03 in the morning to 7:27 a.m., in which at a later point in time around November, a forensic dive was completed of the victim's phone, which was previously found dumped in Lucin Pond around June 19th when it was found by authorities. The forensic dive showed that the timestamp of 7:27 a.m. was from a time-lapse video in which it showed Brenner after the murder Dylan Rounds inside of his trailer cleaning up. In recent time though, breaking news came out on East Idaho News with an interview between Nate Eaton and Candice Cooley, Dylan's mother, in which they've reacted and shown the footage of that time-lapse video, and it's rather shocking in regard to what you can see within the shot and even some blood shown too. Clearly, this footage was of high importance at the time, which led to the conviction. However, it was unexpected that now the video would be released public. Join me today as I share the clip with you, break down and analyse it to understand what really went on in the mind of the killer, James Brenner. Unfortunately, there was no audio attached with the video piece, hence why it was silent. Who knows if any noises were made or expressed by Brenner himself. Nevertheless, the behaviour of him, the coldness and lack of facial expressions does tell a lot. But in terms of the footage itself and the surrounding area and stuff in the background, what does that tell us? Let's take a closer look right now and check if there are any other items of interest, and as well the firearm too. Is it possible that was the murder weapon? So I've got the screenshots in the correct order, and we'll just break it down bit by bit to try and understand what we're looking at. First of all, it appears that it's in Brenner's hand pointing down at the ground. What we do need to acknowledge is he does seem completely oblivious to the recording itself. So likely when Brenner picked Dylan's phone up after the death situation, he may have accidentally hit the record button from the lock screen. It's something that I've done myself on iPhone. It happens. Making it to his trailer, supposedly. In terms of what we see here, it could well be the trailer. I did try comparing it to other areas of interest on site of the property, like the grain shed, but the walls and the colours do not match, and even that small little tool shed near to Brenner's trailer, that appeared to have no windows. Whereas here it does, so likely it was his trailer or RV trailer in which he was in at the time when cleaning up after himself. There appears to be some kind of like bottle on the ground, tub filled with whatever, could be water or maybe empty. It does appear to be a bit dusty and dirty, the ground area. And then by the side there is possibly a door or window that's on the ground. On the left appears to be, I don't know, it's kind of like brownish, maybe a chair, maybe some kind of seating with a bit of paper and rubbish on the area. So I'm just describing what I see. Of course, if you notice anything yourself which stands out, you can always be sure to drop a comment down below under this video. And then when we move on to here, this is when the phone kind of flips up, looking at the ceiling, likely when Brenner placed down the phone. Would it have been screen up or would it have been camera up? Likely you would think it's camera up, because if it was the screen facing Brenner, he would have seen himself, he would have seen the recording and he would have ended it, correct? Or at least that's what I think. So there definitely appears to be a panel, a window on the right hand side. As you can see, a light is coming through. You can kind of see the sky as well. And then on the wall there appears to be some reins and saddles. On the left, a pink rein or a bit of rope dangling down beside him as it brushes by. Likely the horse saddle is to do with his former horse at the time, called Briscoe, who he had. And that horse, Briscoe, was kind of tied in supposedly with a case of Dylan Rounds in terms of where the horse went and setting it loose or passing it on to Kurt Wadsworth and all of that. But the other thing that's interesting here is the first glimpse of where you get to see a bit of Brenner himself, his clothing, his shirt. And his shirt or jacket, what he's wearing there, is one that was later found retrieved by police inside of his trailer, which did have Dylan's blood upon it, as well as DNA touch base from Dylan. So incriminating footage here, as well, finding the shirt, which links to Dylan, the timing of it too, the conviction. There appears to be some kind of possible dried blood on the shirt area, if you can see there, the colour tone of it. And it does become more apparent and clearer upon the next slide. As he extends his arm, there appears to be bits of blood on his elbow, his wrist and hand. He is also holding some blue material, which is likely a cloth, a bit of a rag. Hopefully you can see the redness. That is supposedly Dylan Rounds' blood. I'll say one thing, that when it came to East Idaho News in the past, when Justin Rounds, the father, was commenting about this supposed footage, which was shorter in length as it was described at the time, it showed Brenner covered in blood. Clearly that was exaggerated, not covered in blood, at least from these angles, but enough to say something did happen, something bad went wrong. He does also have a watch around his wrist, and just below the strap there's more blood there and a bit in the hand. If we move on to the next slide, that appears to be like the blue cloth rag, which I guess maybe placed down or glancing over the phone. I mean, there is a little bit of eye contact made with Brenner looking down at Dylan's phone from the looks of it. I guess he didn't notice it was recording at the time. And then on some other slides, I've rotated the screen just to make it a bit easier for you to see. So, for example, this one, I flipped the image about, rotated it more so you can see what he looked like. A bit of dried blood on near to the arm, shoulder area. He's looking off camera, more likely down at the firearm or cleaning something off his hand, possibly. You look at his facial expressions, look rather stiff and cold. Not much expression being emitted, and that's like how he normally is and how he was at the time and onwards, even when Justin and Candice came on down, post disappearance of Dylan Rounds in the early days, reported as a missing person, June onwards, trying to talk with Brenner, work out what was going on. When did you last see Dylan? And, Brenner, the way he was describing it, didn't really show much emotion, didn't really give much away. He doesn't look that sad, he doesn't look happy, he's not really bothered. No blood on his face though, no like injuries, scratch marks or self-defense marks from Dylan Rounds, at least. Moving on, here's another angle, and this is where he's actually looking straight down, if you can see. I mean, as for the head shape, it looks a little bit dodgy, but, it just doesn't react. So it goes to show how oblivious he was at the time when this was recording it all, because surely you wouldn't want to incriminate yourself with footage like this. This is where the main part comes on in, because this is clearly a firearm that he's holding, but is it the firearm which was used to shoot Dylan multiple times in the skull? Because the autopsy, the reports and all that, when the body was retrieved onwards in 2024, revealed that Dylan was shot multiple times in the skull. with a firearm, but was it Dylan's own firearm or was it one of Brenner's? You never know. When looking at it much closer, it does appear that the barrel is rather long but somewhat thin, likely a handgun, a revolver, a pistol. Is it chrome? Not from the looks of it. I know there was rumours in the past by the likes of Ty Corbin, a supposed local, that said Brenner had a chrome-style handgun, which was disposed of or hidden somewhere. Was this firearm, though, even if it's different, was this firearm actually retrieved? I'm not too sure, because the style of it, it does look a little bit worn and old. I know the quality of the visuals aren't the greatest. There is a different image in a second where you see it slightly different, and if anyone knows the model of the firearm, you can always leave a comment down below, that would be appreciated. But you can see how he's making great eye contact with it. Cleaning this particular firearm just after Dylan's death, you could link one with the other and say this is the murder weapon. He's cleaning it down of evidence, DNA. Or it might just be a coincidence that this is just yet another firearm which wasn't used, but he decided to clean this one in particular. There we go. So I'm going to zoom in here so you get a little better view of it. In terms of the barrel itself, when I look at it, first of all, that little tip at the end as it goes up like a triangle on its side, it kind of reminds me of like a revolver style handgun. Could be wrong, but that's just what came to my mind, first of all. I think the possible ammunition, or was that more so to do with Dylan's own firearm, 9mm, the bullet, the caliber? That could be to do with Dylan's firearm compared to this. But let me know, guess down below what you think this type of firearm could be, and if this was the one actually used. We might have one more. Yeah, so no matter how you flip the image, it's not exactly clear enough. You can see the handle of the gun itself. The length of it is a fair size one for a handgun, if I'll be honest with you. But yeah, it's got rather a long barrel. Is it an antique firearm, an old one, more of a modern? Kind of hard to tell. I can't see any blood on the firearm itself, but you know, clean it down of touch-based DNA. Though then again, it seems rather pointless because Brenner is not wearing gloves here, so whilst you're cleaning it down, you're still leaving touch-based DNA upon it. It seems a little bit pointless if he was trying to clean it. His facial expressions, he doesn't really seem too bothered either. Still, more so like a straight face. And then once again, rotating it. This one's kind of odd because it looks like he's looking right down at the camera, which is a bit chilling, but he doesn't seem too bothered. We might have a slight squint on his face, but after what he's done to Dylan Rounds, and that's what the murderer looks like. Taken out on Dylan out of nowhere. For what actual reason or direct motive, never been given nor explained by him himself, which is disappointing. So now what I want to do is continue on with the rest of that interview with Candice Cooley on what she had to say about that footage and more, analyse details if needed, add on extra times, and even refer back to the map analysis just to refresh people's minds. And for those that are new to my channel and the case itself, you can get an idea of what was going on at the time. Dylan's phone, the most important piece of evidence, the phone data, the pings, really important and vital, going on from that 7:27 time-lapse little video recording unknown to Brenner. Candice Cooley says it's the first time she has ever seen that footage, just recently as of around the 20th of this month. She wasn't expecting to come across it, wasn't expecting it to be released publicly. I mean, I can understand it being released onwards now because with the case being done and justice being served for most part of it, yes, there's still some grey areas in regards to Brenner, the motive, some little bits and bobs, but justice finally delivered, more so back then onwards. Now you had I think a Google Drive or documents which had all the case discussions, photos, videos, interviews, over 1,000 of them. And I do believe seen some still screenshots of what we've looked at today. But as for the footage, may or may not have been there, but publicly it never has been until now. So it's kind of interesting as in right now, recently, considering time has passed on, it's out. Candice Cooley mentions about James Brenner appearing completely emotionless in the footage. and how he has been most of the times, and even appearing in court, whether he was stumbling along from a past leg injury or it's because he was shackled so it restricted his movement, whether it was done for a plea of attention so people would be leaning on him in court so he appeared distressed or in pain. Regardless, his facial expressions were pretty still and stiff and never really changed. However, maybe more emotion or an aggressive side was shown at the times of when Brenner shows the inner monster in himself with whoever's in front of him. Because it's not the first time he's got in trouble with police. Brenner has constantly reoffended over time. And we looked at some previous documents in the past where there was some shootings or threatening behaviour with a firearm. He had the Maryland shooting, which was kind of like treated as a wounding, but originally done like with malicious intent, but his attorney or lawyers were able to reduce the charges, so it was just seen as a wounding, a work-based dispute. And it just so happens that with Dylan Rounds, that was kind of like work-based as well because of what Dylan was trying to do. Grain truck, park at grain shed because it was going to rain, and I guess Brenner was being petty, frustrated, and anything else along the way which triggered him. Didn't deserve it, but it's just the way Brenner is. Candice Cooley does make reference about the Dylan Rounds call, and this is to do with like a rough little timeline, which I actually remember. And Candice brought up the odd time here and there, but we can add on more later. That at around 6:51 a.m, Dylan Rounds was at the gate, the north gate leading to the grain shed. He stopped, made a call at 6:51 to reach out to his grandma Karen Rounds to say what he was going to do and what was going to happen afterwards. He would call back, never did, so that's what sparked the concern. After 6:51, 6:58, attempting to make a call to Brenner, who's down at the property, did not answer. If Brenner had answered the call, could Dylan have been alive till this day? Maybe, maybe not. I guess Dylan was probably just advising and warning him what was going to happen next so it didn't disturb him. And then the next phone ping was at 7:03 a.m, which was at or near the grain shed, in the process or just after parking the truck in the shed itself. And then that's probably when the confrontation took place, because after 7:03, the next timestamp, which was roughly rounded up to within a 30-minute time difference, also 7:27, which is that time-lapse footage, which then shows Brenner in possession of Dylan's phone. And then by then, Dylan's already gone, been shot, left out to just bleed out, maybe buried temporarily on the spot. Not quite sure the order there, but Candice Cooley mentions about how James Brenner picking up the phone, accidental recording. It can happen. She's tested it herself with older iPhone devices. I've had it happen to me myself, so it is very possible. But one thing that did stand out, which was quite interesting, was Candice said originally they were told that the evidence was only 18 seconds long, not 1 minute 16 seconds. So they were lied to, yet something else. But why? How much was actually shown? It's okay saying the 18 seconds of that clip, the first 18 seconds, the last 18 seconds, or a midpoint in between, or was it cut up as like a small highlight mashed together? Because most of that footage, even though it's only 1 minute long, very important, the most important part would be where you get to see Brenner's face, the blood on his arm, and then the firearm in view. As for the other bits, it's just him moving about slightly and you don't really see that much. What was actually shown to Candice Justin in the past, if it was only 18 seconds, might have been the most important part, possibly, because how Justin described it in the past, although it sounds a bit exaggerated when comparing it with what we're seeing now, it's to do with like the blood on him, supposedly washing or cleaning, and the phone either bouncing or pointing upwards. So it seems consistent there. But, you know, I just don't know why they'd be lying to the family about the length of the video when the rest of the length of the video wasn't, you know, exactly eventful, being honest. Candice Cooley also mentions that, you know, there would have been no conviction if that video of Brenner never existed. And I can understand the process of that is because whilst the footage doesn't show Brenner in the moment of killing Dylan, it shows the after effects. It shows visible blood on Brenner. And in that footage, with what he's wearing at that time, based off the timestamp, the timeline, the phone pings before and after, and how you can narrow it down to when Dylan died, it does tie in together. 7:03 was the last time Dylan was in possession of his phone. 7:27, Brenner's now in possession of it. So you can see the change up on who owned what. And furthermore, what also needs to be acknowledged is, with the police at a later point searching Brenner's property trailer, finding his shirt within, which had the DNA from Dylan on it and blood, it's kind of self-explanatory there. And with the firearm as well, you could put the argument across and say, well, based off the firearm, based off the cause of death, it could link, and just the cleaning, the timing of it, and the act of disposing of the phone itself, trying to maybe get rid of evidence. But I'm sure that Brenner wasn't aware of this time-lapse footage. I think he would have disposed of the phone regardless, I guess, so it couldn't be tracked, couldn't be found. But it just goes to show how durable phones can be, and it's not the end of the world. You can always find another way around it. Candice Cooley mentions that previously they were told that the video wouldn't be released in case Brenner wanted an appeal. So I'm guessing that if it's been released now, Brenner won't be getting, or just doesn't want an appeal then. But could it come back into the future? Maybe, but what chances does he have? Does he have much? Probably not. Another thing that Candice said was, what else could come out as for evidence? That uncertainty, that something like this, which was quite eye-opening and maybe a little bit shocking, how it's come out now. What other bits and bobs are in the background, which maybe some may know of, but just not anticipating to come out? Or could there be other evidence out there which Candice doesn't know of, or just certain family members and friends that may slip out at some point or be released on purpose? It does make you wonder. In terms of Candice Cooley, she mentions about the timeline after the video itself. We're given a bit of a timeline in regard to leading up to 7:27, but what happened after that? Well, I can describe it to you now from what Candice Cooley said herself, and then I'll show you more details based off the original information, the phone pings themselves, so it makes it a bit clearer. Is that you got James Brenner in possession of Dylan Round's phone from 7:27 onwards up to 3 p.m. onwards. Just take that into consideration. So cleaning the gun, that's what Brenner does. After cleaning that firearm, Brenner goes down to Dylan Round's farm for unknown reasons, never explained, which is odd. Spent about 30 minutes there, or at least that's how it was worded in the past. And then once done there, back to the grain shed. Why the grain shed? To dispose of Dylan, temporarily bury him. Well, the next point Candice mentions is that the phone in possession of Brenner, which is Dylan's, drops in elevation, where Dylan may have been temporarily buried in the trench, or in a trench on the property, meaning he was buried more than one time, meaning I was right in the early days when it came to the desecration and the different means of being moved about and how that could link in, even though other people tried countering me. It's quite interesting. The next point mentioned the phone ping was stationary on site of the property for about 6 hours or so. And then Brenner driving down the back roads to Lucin Pond and disposing of the phone once and for all, or at least that's how he thought it would be, but it was found at a later point. And then the final point mentioned by Candice Cooley was that physical phones could be very damaged, but all the data can still be retrieved if the right people and the right resources are used. And thankfully, in the Dylan Brown's case, that's what's happened there. But let's just take a look at the map itself so you can see the times complete. So what you're looking at on screen right now is where Dylan's farm was. Not where he lived, but where he worked at, and his pivot as well, crop, which is probably hard to see now. You see like circular rings and then the main line in the middle going all the way down. And that was at the time. So we've got 2 little timestamps here. What we need to focus in on is Dylan Rounds waking up before 6:50 in the morning. There was supposedly witnesses nearby as well, which is quite shocking, at Little Pigeon Mountains, as you see down here, camping nearby, overlooking the farm down there. And they also saw Dylan working late at night doing some farm work in preparation, getting it out the way before it rained the next day. The witnesses did say that it was raining hellaciously in the morning time, but it must have been somewhat okay for Dylan to be able to still keep his seed dry, because there was a bit of a tarp covering the grain truck. But before 6:50, Dylan, at some point getting into the grain truck, then taking it down to the grain shed, as you see down there. Following this road itself, which when you go all the way down, it actually leads to a crossroad, and it comes down to like a popular tourist attraction area, which is known as Sun Tunnels. You'll see highlighted on the left there in purple, which is like an official marker. So this is the crossroad. That's looking somewhat south. There is Sun Tunnels, you can see. Click again. We're facing north. East, down that way, Dylan's farm. North, heading up that way to the grain shed property. You see highlighted in yellow. First marker, 6:51 a.m. Dylan calls his grandma, Karen Rounds. Hopefully you can see the text. If not, apologies, it must be the terrain and quality which has changed with time because of satellite imagery, because in the past it was quite grey. It's changed now because it's been updated. 6:51, 6:57, 6:58, and the gate that was there, very flimsy one. Then to here, which is the grain shed property, as you see. That's what it looks like. Brenner's trailer was there where that marker is, but no longer anymore. Little shed there in black, and then the grain shed there. And then by the side, you did have trenches which ran down. Do you know, as you see there, the shaping of it, kind of like trenches. I don't know if they're the trenches which Candice is referring to, but temporarily on-site property where Dylan was buried. You got the backhoe, which is there in the yellow. 7:03, Dylan at the shed. 7:27, video recording, kind of like what we saw today. Then after that point, I said, going back to Dylan's farm, but this time Brenner himself taking a visit, 30 minutes. How did he get down there? Never really was explained. Likely in his own vehicle, possibly. He's not going to be walking for sure. And that was at roughly 7:43 a.m. leaving grain shed after 7:43 arriving at Dylan's farm, spending about 30 minutes or so. A fair length of time to not end up really doing much, supposedly. Going back to on site, back to the shed, which Candice Cooley described, maybe to dispose of Dylan. And then just remaining, 8:23 a.m, Dylan rounds fair and returns back, and then onwards, not much, very quiet. And then going into the afternoon when Brenner was supposed to be meeting up with his friend Don Hatley at Don's place, which is just across over the pond, which we'll get to shortly. If I've still got the marker there. Because it was Memorial Day weekend at the time, back in 2022, 28th of May. So like hanging out, having a barbecue. So Brenner was able to do what he did and be covered in blood and then clean up and then move on like nothing happened from the looks of it. The back roads which Candice referred to would be highlighted in yellow here from the looks of it, like going around the back where it's quieter, the route. Okay, so heading down here, that mound there is known as Lucin Hill, the surrounding area, Lucin Hill. Driving by, you see the marker there, Lucin, and then the pond just on the right there at about 3:51 p.m. Final phone ping before Dylan's phone was dumped in the pond and kind of like attempted to be destroyed. There have been some changes to Lucin Pond since, when it had been dredged, dug up, investigated, things moved about. But that's where the water was, and I think it was on the west side where the phone was found around June 19th, 2024. So that's what sparked all that off. In terms of the yellow marker, that actually goes to Don's place, which was, that's kind of outdated. This is actually outdated, if I'm going to be honest with you, because it's actually over that way, okay? It's a very rough estimate, okay, because there you go. You see what that tyre is? Following that road to here. It just goes to show how extensive my map knowledge is. I've not covered this case for over 2-3 years or whatever, and I've just been able to pinpoint the location of Don's place, and yet actual locals that lived nearby couldn't even competently reveal the location because they kept stalling and arsing about. But look at me, I've summarised it quick. That's Don's place. That's where the barbecue took place. Whether Don was in on it or not with Brenner, whether Brenner confessed to Don, who knows? But yeah, that's what happened. And then maybe later on in the day, that's when Brenner moved Dylan on again, or into the Sunday to like the final resting place from the looks of it. And in terms of the final resting place, although I don't have it marked on this actual project, roughly pinpointing it, off site of the property. Okay, so I've just jumped about a little bit because I've just loaded up my other project just to make it a bit easier for this one. Because of the terrain or quality changing with time due to satellite imagery, visually trying to pinpoint certain things which were hard to see already is even more difficult now. So we're facing north. This is kind of like the property area, roughly, where you see it highlighted with blue and red. The red is the outline, the fence line, and on site is the property here, kind of like a square box in a way. Facing west, highlighted in yellow down here, is the road which can lead up to the other gate, kind of like the west gate, and that's close to the fence line, as you see. And on this satellite imagery, it's just a little bit clearer because you can see where the black line is. That's where the gate is roughly. And then you follow that black line in parallel to the red line so it doesn't overlap. You can kind of see where the fence line is as it runs all the way down to the shed, another one down there. Don't ask why it's called the bra shed. It was just a bit dodgy, that. But it's roughly there. Dylan's body found the 9th of April 2024, because the 9th of April is the day that Brenner decided to do a plea deal in which his charges were reduced, which is unfortunate, but he was willing to reveal the location of where he did bury Dylan's body second time round, and roughly put there the coordinates there. I was the only person to actually competently reveal the location of Dylan's body. A lot of other people were stalling, BSing, and not actually revealing it or taking action. But I had limited breadcrumbs, I did what I could, and I pinpointed it pretty accurately. And this is off-site at the property, but close enough to where searches were done. Full spectral drones, once military restricted, which can scan the area, ground penetrating radar, group searches, private searches, and yet they couldn't locate Dylan's body. They still had to rely on Brenner. If you didn't have that incriminating footage, you wouldn't have had a conviction, wouldn't have led to probably Brenner opening up either. No plea deal, and if there's no plea deal, he wouldn't show you where the body is, you wouldn't know where the body is. It'd probably still remain a mystery till this day. So it goes to show how important it all was and the order how it followed in, a chain reaction. All in all, hopefully you found this video somewhat interesting in regard to the Dylan Brown's case. If you would like to learn more and previous coverage in terms of all the details and how things came about, you'll be able to find the full playlist of over 497 videos, all done by me, located top right corner of the screen where the eye symbol is. If you do want to support the channel, some links down below, and be sure to drop your comments as well. Let me know what you think of all this. And yeah, my name's Warlike Ref. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.